Hollywood is doing itself absolutely no favours if it's trying to counter claims that it's run out of ideas and originality. This year alone, we're going to get Toy Story 5, a Star Wars, Spider-Man, Supergirls, Avengers, but this time studio archaeologists have dusted off Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr. for another cinematic merry-go-round. Look, even the year's biggest movie, The Odyssey, is a remake. And then the bingo card, classic monsters. We've already had a Dracula and a Frankenstein this year, and a Bride of Frankenstein. King Kong is living on Apple TV. The Werewolf is coming out in January for the first full moon of 2027. And this weekend, we're getting The Mummy. Look, I saw the 1999 Brendan Fraser version on the opening Friday night. For me, it still holds up. I was obsessed with ancient Egypt as a kid. I've been inside pyramids in Cairo, tombs in Luxor, and let me tell you, there's a heavy, ancient silence there that no amount of CGI rock scorpions can replicate. There is a weight, a heft of death that could be tapped into to create something truly terrifying. So Blumhouse is taking the wheel, and I'm wondering, are they actually digging for horror? Or is this just another IP wearing bandages to hide the fact that it's dead on arrival?
Getting old sucks.
Historically, horror has always been my least favourite genre. For the longest time, I just found it lazy, repetitive, a conveyor belt of cheap jump scares and recycled IP. But recently, I guess since that pre to post COVID era, horror's become the genre that's actually taking the biggest swings and risks in Hollywood. Studios like A24 and Blumhouse are actually giving filmmakers with distinct voices a sandbox to play in. I found myself genuinely enjoying a lot of horror films lately. Barbarian was the one that completely sold me, and that led me directly to seeing Weapons, a movie I literally forfeited a Friday night IMAX screening for because they put previews on the Thursday in a tiny cramped box screen, but I had to see it immediately. Hereditary fundamentally creeped me out, and Bring Her Back was an incredible ride, building perfectly on Talk to Me and giving me the absolute willies. Fuck that creepy kid. So when you take this modern era of horror that's taking real risks, mash it up with a subject I find genuinely fascinating in ancient Egypt, what's the worst that could happen? Well, having watched it and slept on it, surprisingly I was able to sleep, I can tell you that what we have is a solid 3 out of 5 gore schlock romp. But before we get into the meat of it, we just need to quickly talk about the ego-bombast right at the start. How often does a director get their name in the title? If we're seeing directors' names up there, it should be the big ones, right? It should be James Cameron's Avatar. It should be Ridley Scott's latest cash grab. I mean, in June we've got Steven Spielberg's Maybe Tarantino was right about older filmmakers being a shadow of their former selves Disclosure Day. But don't worry, we can always rely on Martin Scorsese's fuck Tarantino's rule of 10 and filmmakers getting old make bad movies because I am the king of cinema. Anyway, what is a Lee Cronin? Hand on heart, hadn't seen one of his films before walking into this. So I immediately, and a lot of people immediately, must go into the theatre thinking, alright, what is a Lee Cronin? Show me what you've got. And what he's got is a hyper-violent horror film that clearly just needed a recognisable IP to give it some prestige or sell some tickets. The film actually has a really solid first 2 acts. It builds the idea effectively. It's genuinely unsettling. For a film that's over 2 hours long, which is long in this genre, the first 2 acts actually feel earned. They're meticulously setting up the deck of cards. Sure, the main actors seem to only have about 3 expressions on rotation. I've got to admit, the grandma taking the absolute brunt of the violence is genuinely hilarious. But then we hit the classic horror sin, bringing a traumatised, violently unhinged kid, Katie, back home instead of putting her into a secure medical institution immediately. Look, I get it. If characters didn't make stupid decisions, we wouldn't have horror movies. The idiot plot is the toll we pay for the ride. But she absolutely bears no resemblance to the Katie from before the events, and the sheer levels of nope this family puts up with make it incredibly hard to associate with their pain. Katie is just buried in prosthetics. It brought me right back to thinking about Bring Her Back. That was anchored so perfectly by Sally Hawkins. The motivations in that film were crystal clear, and again, seriously, fuck that creepy kid. That kid was so much more effective without needing to look like a practical effects experiment gone wrong. If you're here for the Blumhouse body horror, Cronin delivers. Nail clippers have freaked me out always, and this movie's taken that fear to an entirely new, deeply uncomfortable level. It's great, bloody, visceral horror. There's also a fantastic subplot with Officer Zaki, the female detective in Egypt investigating the disappearance. It's so good that honestly her investigation should have been the bulk of the film. Unfortunately, when they finally find out what happened to Katie and we enter the final act, that's where the bloat and the rudderless direction really creep in. It's like Lee Cronin sets up the magic trick perfectly, but ends up actually cutting his assistant in half in the third act. It turns into a shotgun blast of gore and random ideas. Why? Because we never really get the mummy's motivations. It's rudderless. It becomes glaringly obvious the film doesn't have the budget to leave the house with the effects and go, full Tom Cruise action adventure, which probably is a good thing as well, but it traps itself indoors and it falls flat. It could have been better, but it's good enough. It's a fun Friday night horror movie. It'll have you squeamish at points, but it certainly isn't the grand return to Egyptian mythology the marketing promised. I just wish they'd been a bit more honest about what they were making.
Would you like to know more?
Movies, popcorn.